Hey, what's up, Splice? This is John. I'm with the content team, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a melodic techno track in under an hour. So, melodic techno, what is melodic techno? Melodic techno is like a style of dance music that is similar to maybe progressive house, a little bit of trance, has a lot of different elements that make it melodic techno. But I think the one thing that most people can agree on is that you typically hear this kind of bass, which is a... Outside of that, there's also other elements that I think are important, and I think one of the things is the groove, the style of synths, and the sound design that are used typically in these tracks. And some of the major artists that are typically relevant in this style are people like Cassian, Anima, Tale of Us. And so we're going to be modeling this track today around some of these artists. So let's go ahead and get started with some basics. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some groups. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my drum bus. So I'm just going to call this bus drums. Going to add a MIDI channel in here. I'm also going to be adding in a bass group. And then I'm also going to be adding in a synth group. And I'm also going to be adding in a tops group and also an effects group. The reason I like setting all this stuff up early is because it just makes it easier for me to know, where everything's going to be going in my project. I don't have to be worried about figuring all this stuff later on. So I like to kind of set up my sessions pretty early on with all the things that I need. That might even include having my synths ready, my effects ready, my presets ready. And this really just helps me kind of get into the zone without having to worry too much about making other decisions later, right? I'm really just trying to reduce the amount of decisions that I have to make early on so I can just focus on being creative as soon as possible. In a real life scenario, I probably wouldn't even be doing all of this. I would just have a template ready for me to go in and be able to just start making ideas. And what I like about that is I can get creative really, really fast without having to worry about doing repetitive tasks and processes multiple times. Another thing that I like doing, which I kind of showed you all in my last video, was just setting up a template with different arrangement markers. And what this does is it allows me to know where I'm going to start my song and where I'm going to finish the track. So I'm going to go ahead and get those set up right now. So this is going to be, my intro. This is going to be sort of like, potentially like my first drop. And this is going to be, I think, maybe my breakdown on the track. So I'm just going to set that marker right there. For the breakdowns, I usually like them to be, anywhere from 16 to a little bit over that, just depending on the style of track I'm doing. It's always good to experiment. I'll have like a 4-bar build or maybe 8-bar build. This is probably going to be my drop. And typically I like to drop in reference tracks of other artists to see sort of where they're doing these specific arrangement details. And the reason I like doing that is because it lets me know, A, that I'm in the ballpark in terms of a song that I really like and what they're doing with the arrangement. And also it just kind of frees me from having to make decisions on, is this breakdown too long or is this drop too long? What am I doing that maybe isn't correct or not correct, but more so just frees up my mind to kind of really get creative and not have to worry about all this. So I'm going to go ahead and set this as my outro. One of the cool things that you can do in Ableton is you can just use these as, you can use a MIDI channel to create your arrangement. So I'm just going to call this arrangement over here. I like to give these different colors that help me visually. I might actually make this intro a little bit longer. And then I'm going to do, sort of like my first drop here. I like to put my drops in this kind of color. And breakdowns. This is going to be my breakdown group. 1, 2. The build. I'm going to color it a little bit red. I'm going to copy this drop. And again, these MIDI clips don't really do anything. They're strictly just to kind of give me a mental guide in terms of the arrangement of my song. And bam, so I got the arrangement down for that track. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some effects. So let's go to the Splice library and let's type in effects. I'm going to start off with some uplifters, uplifter. you know, this one might work, so I'm going to get this one. I like grabbing about 4 or 5 of them. You know, there's no real reason why. I just like having different uplifters in different sections. I'm going to label these uplifters. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. So I got 4 uplifters right here. I'm going to set these kind of in their own subgroup inside of Ableton, so a group within a group, uplifters, and then I can just start populating these throughout my session in different places, and I can adjust to taste depending on you know, where all these different guys are going to go. So I got some long uplifters, I got some shorter ones. The shorter ones I kind of sometimes will stack with the longer ones just to kind of create like a last second focus or emphasis on that pre-build spot. So I'm going to go ahead and bring these down. Actually, I'm just going to use a utility tool to bring all these down. I'm not really worried about gain staging or anything like that at this point. I'm going to do -16. I like working in intervals of 3, so I start at 0, -3, -6, -9, -12, whatever. And I just noticed that volume typically sounds more, those changes sound better in intervals of 3. Not better, but more noticeable. And then if I want to really get super detailed with some changes, I might do them at 1.5. And again, these aren't really standard rules. These are just sort of rules that I kind of have mentally for myself. I think that when you're producing, it's just good to sort of have like a set of guidelines for yourself so that you kind of know more or less what works for you. All right, so one thing I like doing with uplifters is I like adding reverb to them. So I am going to bring this reverb up to, I don't know, let's do 12 seconds. And I'm going to have these like this, like this. So I'm going to send this group of uplifters to this reverb down here so that they have like a nice little tail. You know, one thing I'm going to do as well is I am going to use some sort of side chain. And so for that, I guess I could use the standard compressor that comes with Ableton. So let's go ahead and add in this compressor here. I'm going to sidechain it from, actually, we need to add a kick first. So let's go ahead and start shopping for some kicks. In melodic techno, you know, you could typically get away with progressive house styled kicks. They tend to sort of match the genre the best. I like that one. If the kicks don't have enough low end body, sometimes I'll do like a little effects trick on them, an EQ effect. But let's listen to what this kick sounds like first, right here. So I'm going to make a MIDI pattern. I like working in MIDI. A lot of people don't. A lot of people just like working directly with audio files. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to set the grid to 4/4, and then I'm just going to do Command E. So now I have my kicks all ready to go. And I'm also going to add an EQ real quick to this kick because I feel like it could use just a little bit more of a punch right here. So I'm going to bring this band over here, band 2. I'm going to look at the fundamental of this kick on the sub. And it looks like the fundamental of it is kind of hitting over here at like 35, 36 hertz, which is a pretty good ballpark for, you know, for this song specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this Q, and then I'm just going to slowly start raising the gain on this. You'll start noticing that the kick starts having a little bit more decay. And you know, I might change that later, but for now I think that's a pretty good decent setting. So I'm going to go ahead and label this kick, and I kind of like grouping these, sorry, I like my MIDIs to look like Lego blocks. I don't know why, that's just how I like to work. So I'm just going to start populating these kicks to where they need to go, or where I think they're going to go. And I'm going to start putting them over here. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so we got those kicks there. I'm going to do another instance of this kick, but this time it's going to be a high pass kick. And the reason why I like doing this is because it allows me to not have to automate this specific technique, but sometimes there's parts in your track where you want the kick to not have all of that low end and you want it to be a little bit more light. And so I'm assuming that this is probably going to be the area where I'm moving in from my first drop into the breakdown. This is where it's going to happen. Oh, and another thing I forgot to do, we got to switch the BPM to something more melodic techno-y. So let's go with 125. That's the typical BPM for this genre. So there we go. We got that kick there. And let's go ahead and move on to some hi-hats. So with melodic techno, I'd say that the hi-hats are generally speaking simple. They're not super complicated. They're not super busy. So I think a good rule of thumb is just to find some hi-hats that are grooving pretty well. And you know, if you have a Splice bridge, which I highly recommend, you can just load that into a channel, make sure it's synced up, and that this is activated. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to be playing back this kick with a Splice loop. Let's go with that one, 4/4. So that's one of the labels that I run. So let's go ahead and drop in this hi-hat over here. And this is probably gonna be the first layer of my hi-hats. I like adding a little bit of compression, sidechain compression on my hi-hats so that the kick transients can kind of stick out a little bit. So we're gonna sidechain our main kick over here to our hi-hat group, our tops group. I'm gonna turn off the EQ. Actually, I'm gonna switch the theme because this theme is a little bit too red for my taste. So let's go with default. Oh no, sorry, not default. Medium dark. There we go. This is the color that I'm used to. Sorry. So I'm gonna go here. Gonna add some compression. Typically on something like this, I like the attack to be kind of high, meaning like a long attack and then a shorter release. This makes it so that it's not so pumpy, and you know, I typically don't like Flappy Bird style compression, so I like it to be almost like I'm masking the amount of sidechain compression that I'm doing. So that's the first one. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do an open hi-hat. I'm not gonna use a loop. I generally prefer to just get a one shot for something like this. This one feels pretty good. Let's go ahead and drag this one into this channel. So I got the hi-hat. All right, let's go ahead and duplicate this a bunch. My velocity setting is kind of low, so I want to bring it. There we go. All right, so I got that set up right there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in like a synth drone. The reason why I like doing this is because if I'm going to make a track specifically in a key, like in a minor key, the key of G or something like that, I'm just going to go ahead and get that out of the way as soon as possible. So I'm going to drop in the Arturia Selena. You can use any synth for this, but I just personally like the sound of it. I just use the default preset. And this drone is really what's going to help me, my ears know what the key of the track is going to be in. And then this is going to be my drone pad. And I'm just going to make this the full length of the track. So I typically think that most melodic techno tracks are usually done in the key of G, G minor, B minor, F minor. But for the purposes of this tutorial, let's just do G minor. And we're going to do a minor key. So if you're not, if you don't have a lot of music theory knowledge, you can just come down here, select your key in Ableton, go to minor, and then it'll tell you the highlighted notes to play. And I'm just going to stack these notes. So that's kind of what I'm going after right there. One of the things that I always recommend for people to do is try to avoid touching the gain on your fader and instead use a gain knob such as the utility tool in Ableton. Just about every DAW has a type of utility tool like Ableton. So try to use that versus changing the faders, because if you want to automate it, it'll just make your life a lot easier, in my opinion, in the long run. You can just go here and bam, you have your automation setting for the gain staging. See, I accidentally touched that and I shouldn't have. Okay, now that we got that, I think the first thing that we need is some sort of arpeggio or a hook or something that can, you know, start giving me inspiration to get into this track. You know, one of the things that I love doing with Splice Bridge and our desktop app is I can go in here, type in, you know, arpeggio, and I can start finding arpeggios. You know, another thing that I can do is go to one of these samples, and then I can literally go in here and make sure that it's synced to my project. So right now, this track or this sample is in E minor, but our project is in G minor. So how do I resolve that so I don't have to, you know, basically calculate the semitones from, you know, the sample to my session? Because right now, if I play it, it's clearly not in key, right? So how do I account for that? Well, you go down here, and as you can see here, you can transpose the samples in real time. So let's go ahead and set it to G, because that's what our song is in. So now I'm setting the samples and every sample that I audition from here on out into G. So now when I play it back here, it should be in G. What I'm going to do as well here is I'm just going to create a simple bass line. So I'm going to go ahead and open an instance of Serum, and I'm going to create a really simple bass. I'm going to go ahead and bring this down a couple of octaves. Actually, let me draw in some MIDI notes real quick. This is going to be our bass, our rhythmic bass, if you will. Insert, there we go. All right, so I got this, and I'm just going to do a simple bass pattern. And actually, I'm going to mute all of this first real quick. Oh, I got to put Serum on here. There you go. And I am going to draw in what I would consider to be a standard sort of melodic techno bass. Oops, I'll just do that. There we go. I'm just going to loop that for a little bit, and I'm also going to add in the compressor that I had from the drum group on here. And then now I'm just going to make a better sound out of this, because this sound is pretty boring. And I'm just going to quickly sound design it. And I'm going to add a little bit of delay to it just to kind of give it some movement. I think delay on bass has always been a no-no, right? A thing you don't do. But I've noticed that a lot of producers in melodic techno do this trick, and I think it sounds pretty cool. They also add sometimes a little bit of reverb, which I think adds a nice touch. Just kind of creates space without needing to add in another instrument. All right, let's go back to the arpeggio that we were looking at. So now that I've gotten that arpeggio and I've downloaded it, I can actually click on this button right here, copy modified sample, and what that'll do is it'll actually transpose the sample that was in E minor and out of G minor, and so I can use that and then I can just go ahead and drop that into you know, one of my groups over here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new group called bus samples, and that's where I'm going to drop this guy in. I'm going to also copy the compressor that I had from the bass over here, drop that here. And as you can see here, the sample is a little bit faster than what it was doing in the audition. So that's just Ableton sometimes not able to calculate the warping correctly. So what we can do is look at the original BPM, which was 124. So I'm just going to put 124 right here. And problem solved. I'm just going to call this ARP because I don't like seeing a bunch of numbers on my samples. So I'm just going to call this ARP. I think it's really important to keep your projects tidy and clean, always having things labeled. It's great for yourself, your own mental health, but it's also great for the mental health of the person that you might be sending this track to mix, collaborate on, what have you. I'm going to add some delay to this because I love delay, and so do melodic techno producers apparently. And I'm just going to loop, I think, probably the first quarter of this right here. Just loop that like this. Great, so we got that part set up. I need to revisit this drone because it was some reason sounding a little bit like it was out of key. And that might be because I put it in a wrong note. Yeah. There we go. So we got the first part of this set up. You know, I'm starting to kind of get into the groove. I'm starting to feel a little bit like where this song could go. But I think it still needs a little bit more, you know, pizzazz or whatever you want to call that. I'm just going to call this Splice Bus because this is where I'm keeping a bunch of this stuff over here. But I think it needs, you know, just maybe some shakers, some extra percussion just to kind of get the beat going. So let's go ahead and look up for some shakers. And let's just go ahead and have this in play mode. Some stuff like this works. Now let's add in a snare. So I'm actually going to group the kick and snare in the same group. The only reason I like doing this is because it lets me do certain sort of filter effects that I'll show you later on. Let's go ahead and find a cool snare. Let's look up, let's see if we can find a cool techno snare. I kind of want like a 909 sounding snare. They just always sound great on dance tracks. No, I want to use MIDI. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and use the Ableton stock 909 because that snare sounds great. So let's go ahead and add in the snare. I'm going to work a little bit on the tone of it. Well, that sounds cool so far. I'm going to add another set of hi-hats just to kind of keep the rhythm up. You know, I personally just love being able to take people on a journey in the sense of like, you know, rhythmically. It's weird, you know, over the years, like I was so focused on the melodies having to sound good and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, if the rhythm isn't there, then the melodies are only going to carry you so far, right? So you got to get the rhythm down, and I think that's like 90% or that's 50% of the battle when it comes to making tracks. So I'm just adding these extra hi-hats. We're just kind of going kind of like that. I'm going to add a little bit of a, I'm just going to high pass this a little bit so that there's no I'll bring the kick up a little bit. 1, 2, 3. All right, so we got that part right there. I think the other thing that we can do here is add in some sort of counter bass. So with Serum, there's a few ways that you can do this, but I typically like to keep these basses that you typically hear in melodic techno a bit more percussive. So I'm just going to go here, select the saw wave form, and I'm just going to add in some MIDI notes for it. And so, you know, one of the cool things about Ableton now with Live 12 is, you know, you can cut notes individually. So I'm going to cut this into the first half of it. I'm going to cut it into 16ths, I think. And then this second half, I'm going to do into 32. I'm going to shorten the duration of each one of them so that the effect is a bit more pronounced. And you can kind of create those types of effects. I'm going to add a little bit of like OTT on this. And I might duplicate this. And I'm just going to go, I'm going to make this twice. This is going to be the bass counter. I'm actually going to take out that delay. I don't really think it. On both oscillators. There we go. Sweet. I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. I think actually here we could actually do the delay, but let's make it 1/16 and 1 just 8ths and see what that does. Yeah, that sounds way better. And on this part, we got that high pass kick. I'm going to bring this actually up to the same volume level. This one was at 5. This one was at 5. And one thing I like doing on these types of sections here is just kind of getting ahead of the curve and adding some reverb effects. I think in melodic techno, it's pretty common for producers to use reverb as a tool to create space and ambience, but also movement. So in this case right here, I'm going to be using reverb to kind of, you know, set us up for the breakdown. And then we can also add a little bit of EQ. I like using auto filter. So I like setting up one like this and one like this, and then I can just kind of automate sort of like, you know, the cutoff frequencies for these little transitions. There we go. We'll be able to still do some stuff. All right, so we got that part set up. Now, I am gonna go ahead and start populating the breakdown with some elements. Let's go ahead and maybe add in another arpeggiator that can take us from this drop over here. And then we can start adding in some other parts that can, you know, sort of start kind of building up this whole breakdown section, which is typically the part of a song that I spend the most time on after I get the drops and all that kind of stuff done, because, you know, that's really the part where you really have to kind of pay a lot of attention to every detail, in the sense of, you know, what types of sounds you're trying to show off to the audience and what your signature sound is going to be. And you know, this is typically where you can hear two different artists stand out from each other. You know, you can hear a breakdown and be like, oh, I know that that's like an Anima breakdown, or that's like a Christoph style breakdown, or this artist. And so I think, in my personal opinion, this is sort of like the one area where you can really kind of have a signature sound on your track. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop in another Serum right here and just slowly start creating a little bit more momentum. And I'm gonna be kind of, masking this synth from the drop into the breakdown, because the goal here with this is to have this synth sort of become maybe like the main sound that's gonna be carrying just about everything else in the track. So I'm just gonna go ahead and initialize this, and actually let me just drop this over here, just start kind of building a sound out real quick. Sound designing, always fun. I'm gonna make this one dotted. Gonna add some reverb. There's some really good presets in Serum as well for reverb and spaces. So play around with that. Just a little bit of a... There we go. So I'm gonna add this to the synth group. So I think for this sound, what I might do is I might do something a bit percussive, so it's kind of like playing off of the other rhythms and the other grooves that we got. And I think what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna send this velocity note to the actual reverb itself. So that way the reverb only hits whenever I have it set to a specific velocity setting. So I'm gonna go down here so you can hear what I'm talking about. And I might do it, let's see what it sounds like if I go like this. Let's do kind of like this right here. It's gonna be doing these individually. And I think I like that pattern, so I'm just gonna copy these guys like this. And then I'm just gonna take out a little bit of the lows out of it. Yeah, that feels good. Let's do that. And then right here, I'm gonna add like a little drum fill. So this is gonna be, like a 909 styled fill, which is pretty typical of this style as well. You can just drop in any 909 that you like. And then I'm gonna create a snare fill. So I'm just gonna legato that. Then I'm just gonna do 16ths like this. And I think I'm just gonna slowly, gradually build it up into a big, something like this. Yeah. On the hi-hats, I'm gonna add a little bit of delay on the hi-hats group. And I'm just gonna automate the wet and dryness right here. So that way there's a bit of like movement happening on this section. And then right here, what I might do is I might do a bass that does some kind of cool effect. And this is the part that's always hard to decide sometimes, is like, what kind of effect do I want to do on this section? I think it might be fun to try something with a lot of movement. And one of the ways to go about that is to play with LFO settings. I'm actually going to put this bass over here on a different group. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to do an LFO to the cutoff. So I'm going to turn off BPM. I'm going to turn off all this stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to send this envelope to the rate of this LFO. and I'm basically going to dictate the speed of how this sound is going to react. So in this case here, I'm just making like a long attack. Maybe a little bit more. And obviously, you know, the higher the rate, then the more movement it's going to have, or the faster it's going to be spinning. And I can also dictate, you know, how long that's going to take. And also the decay. Gonna add some reverb, some delay, all kinds of cool stuff. And some reverb right here. Let's do like a big. So we got that part here. And this can just be like a moment, and this little section doesn't have to be like a, you know, a very long part of the breakdown. There we go, something like this. And let's go ahead and drop this in over here. We're gonna add in another sort of lead or arpeggio. I got all that stuff in, and now I wanna be able to kind of add some extra elements. So I'm gonna browse through Splice and look up a lead. And sometimes on these breakdowns, I actually kind of like to keep the hi-hats going for a little bit, and then I'll just use volume automation to bring them in and out. So let's go ahead and do that here. One other thing that I think we're missing on this part, at least, is we need some atmospheres. So let's go ahead and find some atmospheres on Splice. So let's go and find something. That one sounds pretty sick. Let's go ahead and drop this over here. There we go. I'm gonna bring the delay down over here because this is really loud. Let's also bring in some melodic techno bass, because these are always great to have in a melodic techno project, right? Let's add in, see what that sounds like. That one sounds pretty sick. I'm gonna go ahead and copy that one into our breakdown, because I feel like this is gonna be sort of like our main hook. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna automate the volume on that to come in kind of like halfway into like that part of the breakdown. I feel like I want this bass too. I'm gonna put this one maybe over here. So we have like another rhythmic bass to go under it. Yeah, let's do this. And then I'm gonna bring this back into the drop here, because I feel like this is gonna be where that's gonna go. There we go. Ooh, I got to figure out what key. That one's -2, so I forgot to copy it. So that's going to be, these are both going to be -2. And I might put them in complex. Oh wait, did I copy the wrong bass? I think I did. Let me see. Oh, +2. That's what I did wrong. There we go. And then we gotta get this one. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and set up some hotkeys. So I'm gonna set this hotkey to #1 so I can just hear my splice loops directly. So that one needs to be -6 on this bass group. And then I'm gonna start adding some, you know, melodic techno vocals. Let's see if we got anything. Yep. Doesn't get a lot more melodic techno than that, so I'm gonna use that. No shame. And you know, one of the things too that I always tell people when they use Splice is, you know, some people say like, oh man, like I don't want to use that sample because somebody else might have already used it. But there's a lot of different ways that you can create or make a sample your own. And you know, one of the ways is, you know, like reversing the sample. Another way is to change the pitch of it so it's like really high or low. Or you can also do you know, really cool tools. I mean, really cool effects such as using gates, using beat repeat, using all sorts of different techniques that can you know, make that sample uniquely your own. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I need to actually get this over here. So I'm actually going to change the mode to beats. I'm going to make this into transient mode, and I'm going to do it like this. 16ths. Now we got this. One thing I forgot is we need to add a limiter. So I'm going to add a limiter to the master. So we're just going to use Ableton's limiter. I'm also going to just kind of gain stage it a little bit so it's not hitting the limiter too hard, which I don't think it is, but yeah, we're good. Also, this bass right here has way too much low end. So usually on the breakdowns, I try to keep the basses high pass at like, I don't know, like 90-ish or so, just because, you know, you want to keep your low end not super bass heavy so that your drops have a lot of contrast. You want your drops to sound really fat and meaty. Breakdowns can be a little bit less intense. Start bringing up the hi-hats a little bit here. I feel like on this section here we need like another element, so let's maybe get some melodic techno strings. Yeah, these sound good right here. Yeah, so on these breakdowns right here, one thing that I always hear in melodic techno tracks are these really like high-pitched strings, which, you know, sound dope. So let's add them in. And I'm just going to loop this, you know, and sometimes to make things more loopable or for them to sound a little bit cleaner, I just add delay and reverb to them. And we also need some ear candy. What do I mean by ear candy? Usually by ear candy, I mean like sounds that have some sort of ASMR element that give you goosebumps that, you know, really kind of get you really excited, I guess. I don't know. So let's add in some ASMR sounds. I'm just gonna get a bunch of them. So I got a bunch of sounds. Now I'm just gonna start dropping them into, you know, my ASMR group. And let's start, you know, dragging these in, figuring out where they're gonna go. I'm just gonna create a bunch of different tracks for it. This one here, this one here, this one here. And, you know, it's just kind of like getting all your crayons out and seeing what works, what doesn't. Usually for this kind of a group, I like adding a lot of reverb and delay. And we're getting close to having something, I think, really cool on this track. So, okay, let's get some of these guys in the breakdown. I'm just going to stack them like Legos, I think, for now, and just kind of see if there's any sort of pattern that arises from doing this. Sometimes there is, sometimes there ain't. But, you know, sometimes going into things blindly can actually be good, believe it or not. So let's go ahead and do an EQ. I'm going to take out a lot of the lows because this is, again, just going to be sort of like ASMR styled sounds and just things to kind of fill the listener with ear candy, right? Gonna just search for some more melodic techno stuff. This is just how I work, by the way. I just start finding stuff, you know, and I don't really think about it too much. Whatever comes up happens, and there's not always like a specific reason for why I'm adding something in. If I like a sound, I'll just drop it in. That sounds pretty dope. Let's go ahead and put that one right here. And you know, this is like also like part of the fun of doing these types of tracks is you really get to just, you know, add in a bunch of stuff in the breakdown and then remove from there on later, you know, if something doesn't work. Let me put this one, I think maybe over here. Ah, there we go. Some more melodic techno sounds. I think I'm going to add this one to... I might just have it be its own channel for now. And I'm going to add in my own reverb and delay to it because I just like taking everything and making it more epic. Because I'm crazy like that. Oh, gotta copy the sample. Boom. There we go. Actually, this would be like the beginning of the breakdown, not after. I'm gonna bring the wet and dry on these a little bit down. Be copying stuff over. Whoops, that one's way too loud. Gonna bring that one. Actually, I don't think I need that one there. I'm just gonna let this right here go. Actually, on this part right here, I'm going to mute it because I want that now. You know, now that I got that bass there, I kind of want this to not do anything until a little bit later. Let's see how this sounds. kick back in for a bit. The high pass kick, just to kind of build it up. On this part here. All right, now we're gonna go into like the build, and it's just gonna be very like, I might bring in this guy again because I thought it was pretty dope. I'm gonna turn off the, yeah, the hi-hat. I'm gonna do another build. And then I think for the main drop, we're gonna need something to just really slap. So let's go ahead and find something that's gonna bring this track together. Oh, well, we definitely need that, because that's going to be what I'm going to use as like the white noise for the drop. But we need just, one more thing. Maybe something like this could work right there. Oh. I like that a lot, actually. I might use that. All right, let's see what this one was. Ooh, yeah. That's gonna be what's gonna glue the breakdown from the build into the drop. And I'm just gonna make that like the center focus of my track. So I got that. What was this one? Now that I got that one, I don't know if I need that one anymore. So let's see. So I personally think that the Valhalla Vintage Verb sounds amazing for creating these like really epic club spaces. So I'm gonna do this trick, which is basically putting it on the effect that or the sound source that I want to create this sort of like big roomy vibe. And so you'll see how it sounds like here. So I forgot to turn off my reverbs. So let me do that. Bring this back down to 0. This effect's too loud. What I would typically do at this stage is try to dial in the kick with the bass. So my general rule of thumb is if I got a kick, I want my basses to be anywhere from 3, 6, or 9 dB lower. So for the main kick on this one, so our kick right now is at -9. That means for this bass group, it should be, maybe like -15-ish or so. And again, it's not like a proper rule of thumb or anything, but that's just kind of like the ballpark that I like having it at. So just check your meters. And then I'm actually going to create a sub bass, which I forgot to do, so bus subs. And I like using square waves for subs now. For years, I was using sine waves, and the problem for me is that they never just sounded right when they were changing notes. And a square wave, for some reason, there's like a science behind it, but essentially a square wave, from my understanding, is that it just reaches its peak quicker because it's a square versus a sine, which goes like this. And a square just goes bam like that. So you'll see what I mean, but square waves just sound way better. Trust me, at least for this style of music. So I'm going to bring this down quite a bit. And I am going to copy this compressor, put it over here, and I'm just going to copy the MIDI notes from this bass, and drop this down over here. Let's see what this is. So one of the things we got to do is take out all the extra octaves on this bass. So I'm going to go up here and high pass all these octaves. So, you know, it almost sounds like I have a sine wave, but it's actually a square wave. So that's our sub. And let's go ahead and play it back with the kick. My general rule of thumb again for kicks and subs is -6 or -8. So if my kick is at 0, then my sub should be -6 or -8, but use your ears, obviously. So here's the sub. So this sub is way too loud. And again, I'm not really mixing with my ears because I don't really have the right speakers for my own personal preference. So there we go. That's about where I want to be at. So right now here it says -9, and then here it says -16. I want it to be about, you know, if it, you know, give or take, let's say it's 10, then I need my sub bass to be around -16. You know, one thing we need here too is just like, you know, some nice risers, uplifters, you know, stuff like this. Go ahead and drop this in. Oops. I was zooming in the whole computer. Let's put this here. All right, one other thing that I like doing is, you know, before a big drop, I like to do two things. One is I like to close in the stereo width of my track. And why? Because, well, when you're going from like a build like that into the actual drop, what you can do is you can sort of narrow in the stereo field so that it's not so wide, and then start bringing it in just a little bit by a time. And then that way, when your drop comes in, it just sounds huge and it's like a big stereo effect. So we're gonna do that here. And I'm just gonna do a very subtle, you know, kind of like stereo width. I'm gonna bring this up a little bit. And then I kind of like to do this curve a little bit before it because it almost like slaps it back in your face. So it's kind of like a little whiplash effect. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the volume here. I like doing like -2 or so. And then that way, when the you know, when the full track comes back together, you know, the listener is going to be just sort of like a lot more, I guess, shocked by what's happening with the breakdown. I'm also going to add in like a little riser real quick. And this is going to be a sound that's just going to, you know, essentially, you know, rise up from wherever this is at down to this other one. So I'm just going to create a MIDI clip for it real quick. And this is going to be in G. So let's go ahead and go to G3. Let's actually put this one octave lower maybe. We're going to play with the bend wheel. Yeah, so we're going to do +24 on the bend wheel. And then I'm just going to close these other serums because I can't see anything. Go like this, create an automation clip for that, and then start you know, building this up. But I'm also going to be playing around with the detune on this and even the stereo width. So I am actually going to change, in Serum you can go to width here, and you can change sort of like the width of the sound. And I'm going to also automate that, so that's just going to be continually going up, and it's just going to get wider and wider. I think the last thing that we need is just maybe like another vocal hook just to kind of bring the track together. And that'll be pretty much it. Let's add in Melodic Techno vocal. And then I just want to add some open hi-hats on this part. Just like a quick open hi-hat loop, just to kind of, you know, get that rhythm back in right there. Let's add that into a separate channel. And I think that, there we go, right here. You can feel that groove right there. Let's get another snare. Here, I'm just going to do a quick that's the one right there. I like snares that have a little bit of like a white noise kind of sound to it, and this one's perfect for that. So let's drop that one in there. And then we can also use that one for the build. I'm going to group all of these sounds here. This is going to be bus samples too. Just do like a quick little EQing. Oops. Got to bring that bass up.
Something about you, I just can't
Well, there you have it, folks. That's how to create a melodic techno track in under an hour. Obviously, the last few things that I would be doing here is really trying to tighten up all the different transitions, the turnarounds. You know, melodic techno can take a long time to produce if you're trying to get it to the perfect level. But, you know, some other things that I would also do is start looking at your EQs, making sure that your kick and your bass are matched well in terms of volume, in terms of mixing, in terms of EQing. And then also just making sure that you have the right elements to hopefully get your track signed, or if you're trying to release it yourself, have it be competitive in terms of loudness, in terms of quality. And you won't necessarily probably ever finish a song in 1 hour, but the whole purpose of this video is just to show you how you can use Splice to enhance your workflow, accelerate your production, accelerate your inspiration, and accelerate discovery of sound. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time.